Hi, everyone. Ed Bixby here with the Global Green Burial Alliance with my co-host Gretchen Spletzer, and this is our monthly forum. Gretchen.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our spotlight and not our spotlight, sorry, our monthly forum. And this month we are doing it on green burial in Indiana. We're doing a state-by-state series, and we're doing the states every other month. And this is our second one. So tonight on our panel, we have couple guests. I'm going to introduce them, but I just want to let you know to mute your Zoom window, and you can put any questions you have in the chat box, and the contact info for our guests is also in the chat box. So tonight we have, get to my bios, we have Emily Schwindler of Aaron-Ruben-Nelson Mortuary. She is the Director of Operations and Engagement at the mortuary, and Indiana's first Green Burial Council approved funeral home. We were also going to have Susie from Oak Hill Cemetery, but she called in sick. But our next guest, Dave Sanders, does work with them, so he can also represent them. But our next person is Dave Sanders of Sanders Funeral Care. He's the owner of Sanders Funeral Care, a funeral provider with locations in Crawfordsville, Waynestown, and Kingman, Indiana. Sanders Funeral Care offers green burial products and services, as well as traditional funeral and cremation services. We also have Laura Richwine of Death Done Differently. She is an end-of-life doula, facilitator, and advocate located in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Lauren is the creator of Death Done Differently, an educational consulting organization that provides home funeral, eco-friendly funeral planning, consulting, and educational services. And for those of you who don't know this about Lauren, the Indiana State Board of Funeral and Cemetery Services filed a complaint in 2021 against Laura, ordering her to stop speaking about death until she obtains both a funeral director's license and funeral home license. Lauren is and has been receiving counsel from the Institute for Justice and has won an injunction allowing her to do her doula work in Indiana, sharing information on her community about end-of-life options. And then we also have Carrie Chastain, who is the instigator of this forum. Welcome, Carrie. She is with Weathers Funeral Home. She's the owner and operator in Salem, Indiana. Weathers Funeral Home offers an array of personalized funeral service and is the only green burial service provider in the city. And we have Ben Upton of Flanner Buchanan Washington Park North Cemetery in Indianapolis. Sorry, I'm so tongue-tied. Indianapolis. Ben is an honorably discharged Marine Corps veteran, life member of the VFW, life member of the American Legion, an honorary life member of the Vietnam Veterans of America. He has a passion for serving and extends beyond his military service. He currently serves as the Vice President of Sales for Buchanan Group, managing 14 cemeteries and 15 funeral centers. He began his career 25 years ago as a door-to-door community service counselor, writing over $1 million in sales his first year. And we are very happy to have all of you here. So, oh, I don't want to forget this last part on his bio. He does some speaking, and his wife Elizabeth says, don't try to be funny, smart, or charming, just be yourself. That's good advice for all of us. So welcome you guys to the forum. And I'm really happy to have you and have this conversation. So I thought today we would start by having Carrie speak, because she wanted to do it. And I just want to also start my experience with Indiana, believe it or not, is my whole family on my dad's side are from Gary, Indiana, and that whole side of the family never gets cremated. They're Lutheran, and they always have very conventional burials there. And so I kind of know a little bit how a lot of things happen there. I don't know if cremation has become more popular over the years. This is kind of going back a ways. But so, and I know that there's a lot of cemeteries there in Indiana. And I also know that many of them have reached out curious about offering green burial services. So, hi, Carrie. Do you want to just start us off and tell us about your business and what you do?
Sure. I'm just new to the green burial movement, I guess. I have interest in it myself. So about a year ago, my husband and I have a Facebook page, and I posted. My husband's also a funeral director. I posted and just asked if there was an option for a natural burial or green burial, how many people would be interested in that? Because what I hear from my clientele that come in, they feel like they have two options: traditional embalming, burial, viewing, or cremation. And that's not true. There are other options. And I think that a lot of people, as you know, the cremation rate is rising, and that is a profit issue for funeral homes. So I want to offer as many things as possible, but I had over 300 responses of people that said, yes, I would choose that over cremation. So I felt that this was something I needed to do to serve my clientele.
Yeah.
So I am talking to people about this. The biggest challenge that I have is there's no cemeteries here where we can do full natural burial. So my husband and I have approached the city cemetery. We've met with the mayor, we've met with the city council, and they are in the process of marking off a specific area in our city cemetery that will be used only for natural burial. We are waiting for the survey, and I think then once that's done and they get the spaces marked off, we're good to go. So I'm very excited about that and the possibility of that. I've had a lot of people calling me recently asking where can we do this. People wanting to make pre-arrangements, funeral directors from other towns calling me, asking me questions. So the word's getting out.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is. And I've had cemeteries inquire, and when I was working with the GBC, a lot of people from Indiana were looking for cemeteries and services as well. So
May I ask you something, Carrie, just out of curiosity? So when
Yes.
when you have approached some of these local cemeteries, did they just brush off the notion, or what was their take on it? Because ultimately you said a key word, cremation is rising and it's affecting the bottom line in the funeral industry. So certainly this is an affront to that. Do they act as if they would consider allowing it, or did they just act as if it's not something that they're interested in?
No, they've been very acceptable, very agreeable with it. So I think I'm going to approach some other cemeteries. We have over 250. I'm also on the cemetery commission for the county. We have over 250 cemeteries in this county. And there's no reason that some of those cannot be utilized for this.
Excellent.
But yes, they've been agreeable so far. I've not met anyone that's not been agreeable with me.
yeah,
That's excellent. That's great.
that is really good news. And it's such a great way to save some of those historical cemeteries too, with all the interest in green burial. So oh, I need somebody to mute their thing. Okay. Hold on, you guys. Let me find out where the back noise is coming from. I can't tell. Well, so let's have Emily, do you want to chime in too? What's your experiences in your business and what you do? Are you finding a lot of interest?
Oh, yes, definitely. I mean, we've been doing green burials since 1935. So I have seen that grow a lot, though, in the secular community. A lot of our faith communities find that to be really important to not be embalmed, which in the state of Indiana, you don't have to be. But a lot of people have that misconception because of tradition or because of the funeral home they're working with, that they have to be embalmed for a viewing, let's say, or for a service at their church. But it's simply not so. So it's comes down to infrastructure that the funeral home has to be able to provide those kind of services. And, you know, as you can see, the three of us on here that are in the GBC are, I mean, there's over 500 funeral homes in our state, but only three of us have met that requirement to be a Green Burial Council approved funeral home. So you can see how that's sort of, it's changing. But I offer a no embalming guarantee to all my clients, and I offer the option of embalming or no embalming. And I would say about 98% choose no embalming when given the option.
Yeah. Wow. And Ben, what about you? Because you're in a bigger company that deals with a lot of this stuff. What do you find in your businesses? Are you finding more interest too?
Yeah, I mean, I think we are. So our green burial section started in 2009. So it's part of Washington Park North, but it's a pretty separate area. About half, a little over half of the families are doing this in advance. So of all the families that we've sold in that area, well, it's 54% have been a pre-need kind of situation. So that's interesting. I think one of the things, going back to something Carrie mentioned, is you're developing that, you know, starting the area, having a pretty good infrastructure in place. What are your rules and regulations going to be to that area to keep it very natural? One of the things that I moved to Indiana from Nashville, Tennessee, about a year and a half, a little over a year ago, really, and I had a green burial area in Tennessee as part of a conservatory, and you know, I came up here and I noticed there was artificial flowers. There was certain things in there that weren't really in line with what our natural burial would be. So going back to how we close a grave, for example, is we actually go in and put prairie grasses and wildflower seeds in. We want that to be completely natural. We want to also have flowers available for someone to pick and lay on their loved one's grave to keep it very natural, and we're going to keep it clean, but we're not going to allow it to be so overgrown you can't visit. So we do go in and cut down any trees. We cut down in certain areas major growth because we have kind of a prairie area, if you will, that's native grasses area. So families choose between the two. But I think it's popular, but there's a lot of people, what I find, that are very curious about green burial, but then when it comes down to execution, they're like, yeah, I like it, but you know, I'm going to be with my family. So I think as time goes forward, it's kind of like a lot of things we provide. I think, you know, what we probably all want to be able to do is provide what our families and our communities want. So having that as an option, I think, is critical. Having options for not being embalmed, like, you know, like what Emily mentioned, I think these are all positive things to allow our consumers to decide what kind of services they want and how they want to be remembered. So.
Yes. Yeah, and I don't think a lot of people know that you can, and I know this is fine with the GBC too, is that you can do green burial within a hybrid. It doesn't have to be in a section. It can be interspersed with regular burials. You just have to, you know, do a little backfilling for a couple weeks afterwards. But yeah, there's it's just as families learn more about it and know what their options are, then they want it. So it's so nice to provide these spaces for them. So, well, I want to thank you, Ben, and also Emily. I also want to get on to Lauren. And Lauren, because I haven't talked to you in a while, I didn't know what the status of your case is right now. I know you got the injunction, so you can continue on with your work, but are you still in, you know, in the midst of all of that?
Yep. So the federal lawsuit that we filed against the state on the grounds of free speech is still underway, and the ruling in our favor that was the injunction, the state did not like, and so they have appealed it, and the case is currently in the process of moving to the Court of Appeals. So we will likely be in court again this fall or winter.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I'll keep things posted. But yeah, I think here locally, we really don't have any great options for natural burial. There's one cemetery that is a religiously privately owned and run cemetery, Concordia Cemetery Gardens, and they do have a natural burial section, but it's not, you know, certified by the GBC. So the requirements are a little looser. And it's not available to a lot of clients, you know, that may not fall within those religious parameters of identifying as Lutheran or being a part of a local church community. So it's definitely something that I hear that people want, they just don't have access to. And I did want to say, I've been trying to make connections to see if we can get any movement on this, but there's a large local not-for-profit, Acres Land Trust. They, this year alone, purchased and protected over 7,000 acres of land, and they are financed entirely by member donations. So there's like 2,000 members who support them, and they want to partner with someone here who would run the cemetery part of things, and their part in the partnership would be to manage the land because they have a built-in clientele. I mean, all of these thousands of members who care about the land, I would bet you almost every single one of them or close to it would sign, yes, I want natural burial or green burial, but they just don't have it. So it's been a couple years now that I've just been trying to kind of court local funeral homes and cemeteries and see if anyone has any interest, and so far no one does. But I'm still very, very hopeful that that's a partnership we can make happen.
I am too. That would be really great. It's because it's not that difficult. And the thing that's starting to happen, as you mentioned, is when it's scarce, then people get inspired to start another cemetery so they can have green burials for their community in them. And then the cemeteries that are already there either fall by the wayside, because I know there's so many cemeteries in disrepair or struggling. And then you get a new, you know, natural or conservation cemetery, which is so wonderful. But these hybrids with their history and their ability to still accommodate, like, I just hope that they can be saved, because there's a lot of them out there. And you know, once a cemetery, always a cemetery. You got to do something with them.
And I think what's critically important for the viewers to understand, certainly here, you know, in Indiana and other states as well, is that, you know, it's great to have a conservation burial ground. It's great to have a natural burial ground. It's wonderful that people choose to become certified by the Green Burial Council. But most certainly there are many, many places that will open their doors to our families to allow natural burial within their confines, the hybrid model, and allow people to be next to their loved ones with a vaultless burial. And so it's not like it's any less than, let's say, what the golden star would be, which would be conservation, you know. And Ben, you had made an interesting comment that, you know, it's just not a cup of tea for certain people, and that's why the hybrid model does become so important, because, you know, that does fit the bill for what some people are looking for. So that's exciting news, Lauren. I mean, I hope that you know, you can find a great partnership and have some nice conservation burial grounds created with that land trust.
Yeah. And I'm really that's one of the things I like about the hybrid cemeteries too, is that it can accommodate everybody. You know, the scattering, the green burials. If the same family wants a conventional burial, it all can be done there. And there's a lot of experience in those cemeteries too. So yeah, it's good. So let's bring Dave into the conversation. Hi, Dave. How you doing? See you up there in the corner.
Yeah, here I am. Good.
Hi. Yeah, so yeah, tell us about what you're seeing, what you're doing. A little, maybe have you done some work, Susie said, with Oak Hill Cemetery?
Yeah, our funeral home just recently got certified by the Green Burial Council. So we're the first one in this part of Indiana. So we work real close with Oak Hill Cemetery. They have their own green burial section at their cemetery. Susie did tell me we have sold 32 plots and we've already had 8 burials throughout the years.
Great.
And I
Yeah.
checked our records and we have about 9 pre-arrangements that they've actually pre-arranged green burials there.
Oh, that's good. So it's moving
It's
along.
growing very quickly. So in this section of Indiana. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember doing one of these with this funeral home in Utah, and they sold their green section out like within a couple years after they opened it up with pre-plans and the burials that were coming in. So I think when people know it's an option and they want to do something good and keep it simple, that they'll do that. But also people will pay for the kind of burial they want too. A lot of times money isn't an option. They just want a green burial. Other times it is an option. And, and it is a problem, I should say, money. And so, if they could have it simpler or cut some things out, to do it, a way that is good for the whole family, then that's also great.
I have
So,
noticed most of our green burials we've done have been
Mhm.
very simple.
Yeah.
The family did not want a service. They literally just wanted, picked up and buried. And we
Yeah.
try to talk them into service. Why don't you guys meet us out there? We'll say a few words. Most of them
Yeah.
didn't want to. They just want it very simple. We're, trying to encourage more and more people, will meet us out there. You guys can place flowers. But we've only had one family that has, but most don't want to. They just want it very simple, pick that up, getting buried for us. That's all we want.
Wow. It's interesting. I've noticed that a lot of people who die don't want a service. They just don't. Like I find that kind of a little bit unusual, but it's not so unusual anymore.
It's not.
Yeah.
I
I
mean, we
think
tell most of all our families anymore, it's the funeral's about you, but it's for the living. It's everyone you left
Yeah.
behind. So
Yeah.
absolutely. And the graveside seems to be the place where most families want to actually remember their loved one. That's why natural burial plays such a key part in that. And David, I mean, I don't need to tell you, I'm sure you're very aware that the majority of these customers, are cremation converts. And I think that's very important for the
Mhm.
viewers and for other funeral directors to understand that. These were people who just didn't want traditional services and they chose cremation and found out they could have something simple, like you just said it. So I'm glad to hear that you guys you understand that and you're accommodating to it.
Yeah. There was a question from Cicely. She said, when you say city cemetery, I think this is for Carrie. When you say city cemetery, do you mean a cemetery that's owned by the city? The only one city-owned cemetery here in Fresno, California is our Pottersfield Cemetery. But yeah, there's a lot of cemeteries that are owned by the cities, as far as I know.
Yes, it's owned by the city.
Yeah.
It's owned by the city and ran by city employees.
Yeah, I know others in different states too. I don't know about that Pottersfield one in Fresno, though. Do you, Ed?
No, I'm not aware of that, but I mean, it's very common for municipalities and towns to own cemeteries. Sometimes they inherit cemeteries. A lot of times they don't want to, but it becomes where that the public uh, requires them to do something about it. And sometimes there are rules and regulations concerning who can be buried in a city cemetery. Sometimes you have to be from that city, or if you're not, the rate is different. So yeah, there's a lot of different variations across the country.
Carrie, when your business with your families, do you find the same thing that Dave said, that well, you're more in the funeral end of it, not the cemetery, right? So my
Right.
question was going to be, are you finding people wanting services, or do they just want the burial, no service, nothing when they ask for it?
This year in particular, we were just having a conversation about this today at work about how many direct cremations we have had, no services whatsoever. And the burial without any service is increasing also. So yes, I'm seeing the same thing. People are wanting more more simple, no services or
Yeah.
very little services.
And I wonder if that is a financial thing because they can't afford it. Because it is
Well-
expensive, you know?
I don't think so. I think it's just what they want. Now, some of the cremation may be a financial thing, but when it comes to burial, we don't charge that much more to have just a graveside service, and I think it's just what they want.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of cemeteries aren't that much more than a cremation. And
So
still
Gretchen,
people,
I've heard a bunch of times that we're using the word simple a lot, and this is something I've talked a lot about with coworkers, people in the industry around the country and around the world, actually, that, what does that really mean? And sometimes we think simple is cheap. And I think that's our perception. I think that, what I'll try to do is it gives families an opportunity. That's why I think having green burial, we've done 245 burials in our green burial section. I mean, I think we're serving that community. I think there's pre-planning happening. We're doing a lot of hybrid burials throughout the cemetery. I think that, people choose cremation, but when they come to us and they say, well, Ben, we just want a cremation. We don't want any services. That's what Dad wanted. I think that's where, as professionals, to help them understand what's really needed is, that since he's gone, Dad's gone now, that his death is really no longer his, right? It belongs to all of us left behind. And so what is it we need to begin that healing path forward? And where does that end? Does it end in green burial? That's great. It's a very natural way to go. I definitely prefer it over cremation, but I think it's not about money. It's about, giving them exactly what they want instead of forcing them into the cookie cutter of, and I learned from in this business when I started, I was taught by people who had been in the business for 50 and 60 years. And this is how we do a funeral. And it was always suit and tie, and it was white glove, and it was everybody did the same thing. Well, we don't do that anymore. Every service is different. So I think all of us having that, variety of options for families. But to me, when someone says simple, that doesn't mean cheap. It just means they don't want to have to deal with a lot, right? They want to make this really easy for them. And there's nothing easier to me than to be able to have a gathering of friends and family that really show that support for the family to have as they go through that year of first. And then afterwards, to be able to have a meal together, have someone's favorite meal, and to be able to coordinate that. So it's just, I think it's full circle, and that may be, I may be alone in part of that opinion, but I think just giving people a true way to have a support system after they're gone, I think is critical.
Yeah, absolutely, Ben. And I think what you've just said too is, and what I haven't heard when I hear that from the others, that, a lot of these have been unattended, let's say, or they didn't want a service. What's so critical with a natural burial is that you're giving the family the ability to care for their loved one in death as they would care for them in life. So being part of the process is very important to them. So I hope that, cemeterians that are watching this or funeral directors understand that you have to really be open to the fact that the families will be a larger part of the actual service itself, because that healing cathartic effect brings them back to the funeral home and brings them back to the cemetery. And that is really an important, piece of this puzzle.
yeah. Yeah. And what Ben said too, oh, my dad didn't want a funeral or whatever. People say that a lot because they just don't want to be a bother or something, but it is for the living to honor the person that they loved and to remember them. So it's so true. I'm really glad that you said all that, Ben. That's good. One of the other things, just a question I have floating around in my mind, because you have a bigger cemetery, is what about the like the Muslim and Jewish communities in Indiana? Do they buy like a bunch of plots, or do they have their own cemeteries? How does that work in your state?
Well, I can speak to both. We have sections within our cemetery where we have sold hundreds and hundreds of spaces. And so a lot of those are the burials are, very much natural.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like you said, that hybrid. I didn't really ever call it a hybrid in my mind, but I should have probably, now that I'm, listening to what everybody else is doing. So that hybrid approach is something we do a lot of, and
Yeah.
to respect the different traditions, their preferences. I think it's really good to mix all of it. But again, having these separate areas where, because memorialization preferences are different, your regulations in the cemetery, if you're anything like me, I've worked around a lot of cemeteries, and I am what you would consider a diehard cemeterian. So if that's a thing, but I love cemetery and memorialization, but it's challenging. You have to take your cemetery rules and regulations and kind of throw it in the trash and start over. And that's hard because we are very traditional. It's all, cremation has changed the way our cemeteries look. So I think
Yeah.
having all the different options available and saying, what is it our community is asking for? How can we keep the area still looking nice where it's not cluttered and people want to come visit, but give them a chance to reflect and remember and place flowers and mementos. And I think you just got to be careful on what memorials go where, whether you have all flat cemetery or upright monuments. I think none of the cemeteries we have now are one way or the other. It is all over the board. And it's
Yeah.
pretty tough to sometimes rewrite those regulations, but I think we got to do that if we want to stay relevant.
Yeah. Yeah, especially right now when things are changing so much too. That's
I would
probably
love to speak to the Jewish question. We're the only Jewish-owned funeral home in the state of Indiana, and we manage a lot of the Jewish cemeteries in Indiana as well. So they have different ones for the different congregations depending on how Orthodox they are, but that's how we sort of got into the green burial space from our beginnings, is that they're rooted in the Jewish tradition of no embalming and all wooden construction caskets and bottomless vaults or no
Yeah.
vaults, depending on the cemetery and what they're allowing. So, they do have their own sections where they
Yeah.
have their specific requirements honored always.
Mm-hmm. And do you work with because I know that, there's a washing in the Jewish thing. Does the family come into the funeral home and do that?
Yes, so our funeral home is designed for the prep room to be open for everyone. So that's another reason we're very popular with the green burial, is that we allow the families to come in and wash and shroud their loved one. I'm also part of the National Home Funeral Alliance. I think Lauren is as well. And that's a really important thing to be able to offer the family to be as involved as they want. I've taken care of a lot of Buddhist, Hindu, Sikh families also want this traditional washing and dressing of the body, as well as the green burial family. And some of my pagan families have also wanted to be part of that process. So we are really glad to be having a designed prep room that we built in 2009 with plenty of refrigeration, a crematory attached, this prep room that can do the washing and all those things under one roof, so that the family can feel comfortable to do that, and then also have services in the same building, participate in cremation if they want to, or load the person into the vehicle to process to cemetery at Oak Hill or wherever for the burial. So yeah, we do that all the time.
All of that makes me so excited. Totally. Because I would want to wash my loved one's body. When I went through a death, I was young. I was so inexperienced with death, but I cared for my loved one through cancer. I was the full caregiver. And when he died, it was like I couldn't let that go. I followed him all the way to the crematory, pushed him in, waited, took him home, because it's like I just had to keep going with it. So I love that you offer that to the families to, do that loving act for them.
And you're right. A lot of people have been the caretaker of this person for a long time, and it's hard to just turn them over to a stranger. A lot of times, especially even with parents who've cared for an ailing child for a long time, being able to wash that child and give them their final bath like they've done their whole life is very cathartic and healing for them, where some people might think that's a strange thing or a difficult thing to do. For a parent, sometimes that's the last way they're going to be able to care for their child. And so it's something we always try to foster. If someone wants to have a home visitation, we do that all the time, taking the body to the home, facilitating that for the family. So it's becoming more popular, especially amongst communities who are moving to Indiana that this was a cultural thing they would have done, and we're trying to approximate that as close as we can within the laws of what Indiana would allow.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question, Emily, just out of curiosity? So as we've seen, the majority of the states in the country typically have that rule where if a body is not refrigerated, it must be embalmed within 48 hours. What is Indiana's rules when it comes to that?
There isn't one.
There is none, really. Wow. So there is no time frame. That's interesting. That's actually very good news, to be honest with you. So,
You don't have to be embalmed at all in our state.
but do they have a requirement of refrigeration after someone expires or no?
No.
Wow. That's
You want to
That's
do it quick then?
Well,
It's-
and isn't it true too, I was gonna ask, chime in, my understanding is also that we have a family or next of kin, in most cases, has 72 hours to even select the funeral home of their choice. I know, of course, that can get complicated if there's a
Right.
partner involved or depending on the nature of the death. And but there is this dynamic that I see, and I have to echo, yeah, what Gretchen said. I'm just so glad to hear that you're offering that, Emily, because one of the things that some of my families face and struggle is like they may want to do some of these things, but then there becomes a real practical challenge of like, how do we accommodate that? Or how do we, if we don't have, I mean, and to my knowledge right now, there isn't a funeral home in this specific area that is open to working with, say, you know, families that are outside a specific religious tradition. And so they're probably serving those communities, but in a little bit of a more secluded way. And so, yeah, families that want that, we really have to get creative and make it work and work with funeral directors who are willing to work with us. But I just think that that's a really beautiful thing and that I would love to see available more and hope to see that spread.
Yes.
Yeah, we get calls from our county coroner a lot because, especially like with our Buddhist families, they don't want the body moved until it's cold. So that's at least 8 hours. And a lot of coroners even don't know how to deal with that.
Yeah. Yep.
Wow, that's so good. I know there's a funeral home on the East Coast called Keefe Funeral Home, and she's got a washing room with like golden bowls and low lights and all the stuff to just make that holy moment. And I also feel like coming out of COVID, we all, you know, the general population faced death so much more than they normally would have that you know, there's questions and there's more of a desire to learn about this and face it, because we had to face so much of it and nobody really knew how when it was happening. And that's why the funeral homes also were so overwhelmed. And it's also why we need funeral directors so badly to be able to do what you're doing, Emily. And because the families do need guidance. They need guidance on how to wash a body and know that it's okay, you know, and they need the space to do it because not every, you know, some people live in apartments. They don't have the space to do this. And I just think it's really great how the industry is beginning a little bit to help families with this. I'm so appreciative to you guys here that is willing to join the forum and talk about it and share.
Absolutely, and it's critically important that they start to embrace the concept that the families are now empowered to want to do this, and I'm sure we'll see more of it. And you know, Gretchen, you just touched on it, and ladies, you know, and everyone here, it's so important for this to be a memorable experience. And certainly, as we know, funeral directors and death doulas know that some things could be less than memorable. So it's really important to guide that family, you know, so they can have that forever memorable experience for their loved ones. So kudos to you and everyone on the call, you know, for providing that.
Yeah.
Emily, I have a question for you. I'm also Jewish. I was raised in the faith. And I remember when my aunt passed away, this is like 1962 or 63. She wanted to be buried in an Orthodox cemetery. And unfortunately, she had the numbers on her arm. and they made them remove that piece of skin before they would bury her. Is that still something that happens today, or is there like a I mean, is there do people still have to be free of tattoos if they're in the Orthodox faith, Orthodox practice?
No, and because of those defilements of Jews, a lot of the Orthodox cemeteries did allow people with those types of tattoos to be buried there. But there's a range now here in Indiana where even if you're cremated, there is a Jewish cemetery for you. You can have cremated remains buried in a Jewish cemetery, which, you know, would have never flown. It wouldn't go in an Orthodox cemetery, of course. But, you know, as we're seeing, even with the green, there is a spectrum, a green spectrum now. People trying to be buried with a vault in a cemetery requires a vault, but it has no bottom. And then the wood casket is at least in contact with the earth. That is a workaround people are doing in some of the cemeteries. Although I did a burial in Maryville yesterday, we tried to take up a vault that just had a section removed from the bottom to honor this person's tradition. They didn't want to be embalmed. And the cemetery rejected the vault, and I had to get a full bottom vault out there. So, you know, you still have to work within whatever the cemetery says goes. But we're always trying to at least inch in people's traditions and let them be as green as they want to be.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I didn't know anything about that, Steve.
Unfortunately, it was prevalent in a lot of my family. We're all from Europe, so it was an unfortunate impact on our family.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Well, do any of you guys have anything else you want to say or talk about? Share family experience or how you've seen natural burial help grieving families go through that process?
I think I can speak to that briefly. Yeah, I know that I've noticed in the times that I have supported families where they have specifically chosen shrouded burial, at times, I think that has a very profound moving effect on those attending, say, a graveside service, both who knew that that was happening and were anticipating it, and especially, I think, those who did not. And there's something about, it's very hard to describe. It's very hard to put into words, but I think if you've ever been in that space, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. There is just this sense of seeing the outline of their body and it not being hidden and them being very present, like that dead person is very present and with you. And I've found in communicating and following up with people afterward, that is very moving and unlike anything that most of them have ever experienced before. But I haven't heard from anyone that it was a negative experience. I've never received any feedback, you know, saying that someone was traumatized or someone was disturbed by it. On the contrary, it's been things like, that's what I want, or I can't imagine not doing something similar. Or I know I had one family member say that she felt like the shrouded burial that she attended for a loved one, she said, you know, that this felt like bearing witness versus just attending. Like previously, I've just been a spectator. I've just come and watched like a play almost unfold, and everyone knows their lines and their parts. And there's just something about the raw humanity of tapping into that, that is very, very real and potent. And I think that it does play into, in some ways, probably the grief process and moving through mourning, and, you know, similar to like, right, if you're hands-on and you're caring for your loved one, I think that death and grief are going to be hard no matter what, but I do think that there are probably benefits for sure to that movement and that involvement. And and just even neurologically creating these pathways in your brain that say like, I can move through this and I can move with this. I'm not helpless. I'm not stuck and frozen. I think those are all very, 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 very important things.
Yes, I do too. I feel like it's really important because, well, seeing a dead body, you know, funeral directors and cemeterians, they're used to it, but regular people are not. So when they see that, it just brings home the reality of your own mortality. And that, that is the gift that death can give you, is that realization, and so that you live better, and so there's just so much to learn from not just fluffing over death, but seeing it, handling it a bit if you can, maybe throwing some dirt on the grave, being a part of the ritual.
And I
So
do think,
yes.
Gretchen, that I think it's important for us to, as businesses and serving families, I think being affordable, right? And I've heard that, like people are choosing, a direct cremation because they want to save money or these things. And there are certain groups. I mean, it's out there where they want simple and it's not money. And there's some families that don't have the money to be able to do something. And I would much prefer them, get placement in our cemetery some way, somehow. I mean, we give free placement. And this is, I can only speak to my time since I moved up here, but we give free placement to every family with their cremated remains. We've placed hundreds and hundreds of cremated remains in our cemetery at zero cost, because I do believe that provides an opportunity to begin healing. We did an event recently to the victims of the Fox Hollow Farms. And part of that, somebody said, well, this is closure. And I said, absolutely not. There is no closure on death. This is creating a moment that their family and their loved ones can begin healing purposefully. So it's giving every family that opportunity, and having some, I want everyone to have their name remembered forever. And again, I think it takes all of us, given these options with green burial, it can be affordable. Yes, some people want to spend more money, they want something else, that's fine. We can all handle that. But I think giving every family an option to be able to have that resting place, instead of turning, their mantle into a cemetery in their home, and what happens years later. I mean, these are things that happen with cremation. I think green burial is a much better alternative where we have small parts of land that hey, here's a place underneath the tree, and we can put a small boulder there with your name on it. It's very affordable, and the families are super pleased. So
Yeah.
Absolutely, Ben. I mean, it's, that's what's lost with the direct cremation, is the celebration and the memorialization. Right. So, this is a big boost and a benefit to the cemeteries, and the families themselves to allow it. I think, what would be a fun little exercise for this group and, for the great state of Indiana would be to ask all of you, if you would, just to give a couple sentences each as to where maybe you would like to see Indiana in the next 5 to 10 years, within this movement. So if everyone who's participated today wouldn't mind sharing a few words about where you might want to see it, let's say in 5 years.
Let's start with Carrie.
I would love to see more funeral homes offering these options, and I would love to see, hopefully, our city cemetery is going strong and we're doing natural burial, and hopefully I can get other cemeteries on board in this area. And I hope that I can educate more people about this, because I do think it is something that people want. And as a funeral director, it is about serving our families. Yes, we need to make a living, but it's about serving our families.
Very well said.
Who wants to be next? Emily?
Sure. I think in the next 5 years, I have a Jewish cemetery right now that is working to maybe turn part of their land into open to all who want a green burial at that location. So I think that is a great way for us to sort of utilize some of the cemeteries we already have, allowing them to do some more innovative things, green burials, hybrid cemeteries, and not, dictating to our customers what they want, allowing them to have an experience, because I think people are willing to pay for the experience. I mean, they might not be having a service at the funeral home, but they're going to the bar, they're going to the park, they're having a service anyway. So giving them an experience that will last and give a family legacy through burial in a way that honors who they are as a person and where they're going to be and a place they can be visited. I hope more funeral homes will get on board with the no embalming thing. We'll see if that takes off. But that would be my hope for the next 5 years.
Very nice, Emily. Thank you.
Yes, we love more meaningful experiences for sure. And how about Dave? We haven't heard much from you. How about you?
Yeah, I kind of agree with everybody else. I just wish more funeral homes would be on board of, thinking outside the box, offering more options. Seems like, Indiana has always been very traditional. So most funeral homes are just, they just offer the same things that we did 100 years ago. But times are changing. I think we need to change with them.
Absolutely.
And how about Laura or Ben? One of you want to go next?
I can go. My hope for 5 to 10 years out would be that definitely we've won this lawsuit. And so the work of death midwives and end-of-life doulas and community death advocates would be protected in the states of Indiana, Illinois, and Wisconsin, so that there's more attention drawn to this, and that it is recognized as valid options. And then we can continue to move forward with providing that and growing everything that's available.
Yes. Thanks,
Gretchen,
Lauren.
I'm in Fort Wayne. I'm doing a mentorship with Lauren. And my hope, Fort Wayne is the second largest city in the state, and that we've got just one funeral home that has just a tiny little portion. It's beautiful. I've been there, but we should have 30 funeral homes in the county that allow green burial. So that would be my hope in the next 5 years, to see those kinds of opportunities multiply for people.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you, Chris. And where's Ben?
Y'all can't get rid of me, right?
Yeah, Ben. You
Well,
have so much going on. Tell us what your dreams are.
Well, a lot like all of us on this phone, on the call, I view all of us doing better in these partnerships. That I was, really criticized at one point in my career. I was at a booth and talking about different things we do, and there was a large I've worked family-owned business for a really long time prior to coming here, and so I was talking with a large corporation, and I was talking to them about the importance of options and sharing with families and the importance of having a service. And they said, they're the competitor. And I said, they're not a competitor. I said, we're all working to serve families. We're all, we've heard the quote, your rising tide lifts all ships. I mean, this is where we all lift each other up. We partner together and figure out how we serve families in the best way. And I think that to me is the biggest piece, that we could all just come together and figure out how to serve families at the highest possible level. I'd love to have green burial options at all of the cemeteries that I work with. I think it's a legitimate thing. I've done natural walking trails that you just walk through the woods, and I had burials all along in Tennessee, and it worked really, really well. There's a lot of different ways to do it. I think it's just getting people more excited about it, creating new traditions and creating that heritage where this is kind of what we do. And I think there's so much meaning to just the natural setting, and it's better for the environment, really. I mean, you think about all the stuff we do, planting more trees doesn't hurt. So
absolutely. No, very well said. And for all of our viewers and for the people that are on this call today, please lean on the Global Green Burial Alliance. We're here to help. We're here to serve. Become part of our network. It's all free. Test the waters, become part of the movement, part of the conversation. That's critically important for all of us. Exactly what you just said, right? The rising tide raises ships. We're in this together. And that is well put. And I couldn't say anything more other than great job and good work, everyone.
Yeah, well, I want to say that I think that the state of Indiana is a beautiful state. I've spent a lot of summers there. I love Indiana. I love the lake up there. And in the cemeteries there, I just feel like there's so much opportunity for creativity and like Ben said, providing these meaningful experiences for families, and just so many things that you can do in cemeteries. So I just really want to thank our panel for talking about this and sharing all of your experiences and thoughts about it. I wanted to mention that next month we're going to do a forum on hybrid cemeteries. So we're going to talk about all the ins and outs of doing green burials in hybrids and what you can do, what you can't do, and all the fun things that you can do in them as well, because there's all kinds of programs you can have. So just keep up the good work, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks,
Really-
everyone.
Thanks
Really
for the invite.
appreciate
Thanks, Ed. Thanks, Gretchen.
Thank
Yes,
you, DGBA.
thank you.
Very
Listen.
welcome. Thank you.
So I will probably be in touch with all of you again, and I hope you have a great rest of the week.
Thanks, everybody. See you at the next forum.
Thank you, Gretchen.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Aloha.